Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Megan Hardy, and I am the founder of Fitness Uncharted, which is a women's health and fitness coaching company that I designed to help women build muscle, lose fat, and improve your metabolism so that you can feel healthy and confident in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond to infinity and beyond. Today, guys, we are talking about heart rate zones for maximum fat loss. And I also have today with me a Starbucks venti iced coffee. If you can hear it jingle jangling in the background, that's my ice cubes at the bottom of my iced coffee. It's a Saturday as I record this podcast episode, and my weekend treat for myself is always a Starbucks venti iced coffee. Well, I say always, it's more like as of like the last 6 months or so, I've really gotten into Saturday and Sundays treating myself to an iced coffee. So normally during the weekdays, I don't do coffee because I also drink caffeinated BCAAs or branched chain amino acids. So because of the caffeine in that, I choose not to do coffee, but I do love coffee. So today is a coffee day, and I'm at the very bottom of the coffee, and it's like getting all sweaty all over me because it's the last little bit. So I'm trying to finish it off before it goes bad. But anyway, let's jump on in to today's topic. So, this actually came as a request from a client. So, we're going to talk about the 5 heart rate zones and what they mean for your workout, and also which ones are maximum or ideal for maximum fat loss. And this was a podcast topic from a client because she said her brother in law, quote unquote, swears by zone 2 cardio for fat loss. She was like, he just swears by zone 2. So can you please talk more on this topic? I was like, okay, I got you. So kind of like cardio zones are kind of like your mom's rule of, don't swim right after you eat. It's more like heart rate zones are less like quote unquote rules, and they're more like guidelines. It's like, okay, what's the rule versus like the principle or the guideline? And it probably is a good idea to like not swim right after you eat. But is it a strict rule? Not so much. I think it was more of like a suggestion by our moms, right? Growing up. At least I got that from my mom as a kid. So let's look at it that way. And your personal physiology is not entirely ruled by the laws of mathematics. So take that and take this whole episode with a grain of salt, because like finding your ideal heart rate zone and ideal cardio zone, like our physiology is not ruled by that completely. Like there is a lot of gray area, and there's some give and take here with these cardio zones. So I'm going to try to give you like the information, apply that to yourself how you so choose. But heart rate zones, they're based on a percentage of your maximum heart rate. So the easiest way to calculate your max heart rate is using the age adjusted formula. So that's going to be taking 220 minus your age, and that's going to be your max heart rate. So this is probably what you see on cardio equipment at the gym. You might see the heart rate zones listed on the cardio equipment, and it might even show that formula of 220 minus your age equals max heart rate. So for example, as a say a 30-year-old, your max heart rate, you're going to take 220 minus 30, and that's going to be a maximum heart rate of 190. Or let's say if you're 50 years old, take 220 minus 50, and that's going to be a max heart rate of 170. So some exercise experts, quote unquote experts, some experts, use the Karvanen formula, which this takes into account your resting heart rate as well. And it creates a little bit more of a personalized understanding of your specific exercise intensity, since it does take into account that resting heart rate. But I'm not going to lie, I literally had to look up what the Karvanen formula is called, because that's how much I use it with my clients or myself, AKA not at all. Like I don't ever use that formula. So if you want to go look up the Karvanen formula, have at it. If you're just like love the science and nerding out and want to do all the math to figure out these exact heart rate zones for yourself, go Google it. I'm not going to talk about it in this episode because honestly, if especially without being able to look at it, it's just going to be a lot of gibberish because it is like a longer formula. But most people on a fitness journey do not need to worry about getting this specific. That's like it's really not necessary. What I find way more helpful is to pay attention to your max heart rate and then also your resting heart rate. So again, the max heart rate, you can do the age adjusted formula we just talked about, and then resting heart rate. So you want to pay attention to what your heart rate is at rest. And if you have a smartwatch, then you can probably actually go to a setting on your watch that actually tracks your resting heart rate. So, like, I have an Apple Watch. I can go in there and like it's logging my resting heart or my heart rate all day long. And I can actually go in and search and find, what my average resting heart rate is. So that would be a number that would be of interest to me along with my max heart rate. As far as getting way more specific than that, that's when you could go use the other formula if you want. But let's talk a little bit about heart rate cardio zones. So you may see heart rate zones described in slightly different ways and also using different names. And that's okay. There's like a lot of gray areas, like I mentioned. But the bottom line is that your heart rate climbs and your body reacts to keep up with those demands. So, as you're doing more high intensity activity or cardio, your body and your heart are going to react to keep up with that physical demand. So, let's go through some of the zones. So, get your pencils out and get ready. So, zone one, let's talk about what that looks like. Zone one, cardio, is going to be more like your warm up recovery. It's going to be easy. You're going to have like a moderate to low intensity. And then this is like 50 to 60% of your heart rate max. So just think if the 30-year-old person, their heart rate max is 190, it's like 50 to 60% of 190. And the primary fuel source is going to be fat in this heart rate zone. So the primary fuel source for this kind of activity in this cardio zone is fat. This cardio zone, zone one, helps with recovery. And this would be something like walking from your couch to the fridge to get snacks. Like that is zone one cardio. Very easy recovery, right? Walking from your couch to the fridge does not require much effort. So that's going to be your zone one cardio. Zone two is our aerobic or endurance cardio, and it's light. It's still pretty light, very moderate intensity, but this is going to be a little bit higher than zone one. It's going to be 60 to 70% of your heart rate max. And again, the primary fuel source here is fat as well. So this is where my client's brother-in-law, who swears by zone two cardio, he's talking about this because of the primary fuel source that it's using is fat. So this could be, think steps, you guys. Like that's where steps and getting your steps in every day is so underrated, but it's so valuable because it's just getting that low intensity, steady state exercise and movement in. And it is a great fat burning zone. This is also going to improve endurance as well, along with fat burning. In this zone two is very manageable still. So just think, you just saw a cute dog and you're trying to catch up to pet it. That is zone two cardio. Okay. Like you're a little bit higher than zone one, but it's not requiring that much effort. And the cute dog that you just saw is not running away from you. So you're not like running or anything. You're just speeding up a little bit to go pet the cute dog. This could also be considered like your warm up or your cool down could be considered zone two. And you can very easily carry a conversation in zone two. So again, just think about when you're going on a walk with a friend, you can very easily talk, right? You can hold a conversation. That's zone two cardio. Zone three is going to be a little bit more tempo, more of a threshold cardio, and it's going to be moderate intensity. This is going to be about 70 to 80% of your max heart rate. the fuel sources here are going to start switching over a little bit. So the fuel sources are going to use fat, carbs, and protein. So still using some fat for fuel, but also carbs and protein. So we're kind of switching over in zone three. This is going to be your zone where you're going to improve your aerobic fitness. So it's great for improving overall aerobic fitness. And it's going to be challenging, but doable. This is going to be like working at an intensity that you could sustain for like around 30 minutes if you had to. So, think maybe like a Zumba class or something like that, right? Your heart rate is up, it's pumping, but you can sustain that kind of exercise. That's going to be more so like zone three cardio. And then zone four, that is our lactate threshold. This is like red line. This is very hard. Like you are huffing and puffing at this point. This is going to be a high intensity at like 80 to 90% of your heart rate max. And then the fuel source more so switches over to carbs and protein in zone four. And one of the benefits of zone four cardio is going to be increased maximum performance capacity. So, again, this is more of your huffing, puffing session, and it's going to be shorter sessions in zone four because of the intensity being much higher. This is where you are feeling the burn when you're going, let's just say, for instance, you're going all out on the dance floor at a wedding and sweat is dripping, but you can push through because you are absolutely killing it. Okay. This is zone four cardio where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting tapped. But also at the same time, you can still push, especially if you're killing it on the dance floor. But you are feeling the burn and your heart rate is getting much higher. That is zone four. Then that takes us to zone five cardio, which is going to be our anaerobic. And this is going to be your VO2 max and peak cardio, like your maximum. The intensity is going to be very high here, and you're going to be at like 90 to 100% of your max heart rate. And then the fuel source is also, again, going to be carbs and protein here. So with zone five cardio, the benefits, one of the biggest benefits is that it's going to help develop speed. And this would be something like an all out sprint for 30 seconds, and you feel like you are actually dying. So it's not going to be a cardio zone that you can sustain for a very long time. It's going to be like a quick push in a sprint or maybe in a cycling class or something when the instructor's like, all right, push for that last 30 seconds. You got this. It is that very high intensity that cannot be sustained for a long time. So those are the cardio zones. Again, I try to give different, adjectives, different examples of what that could look like. When you see it, whether it's on cardio equipment at the gym, or even if you go look it up online, you're going to see a bunch of different descriptions of what it looks like. So I try to kind of encompass some of those, but those are all five of the cardio zones. Now, as far as the people listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in what exercise zone is best for weight loss, most likely. You might have some other goals, endurance or strength goals, things like that. But a lot of the people listening, you're probably curious about which one's best for weight loss or fat loss. Am I right? All right. So let's talk about that. It's easy to assume that pushing yourself to your max is like the most effective way to lose weight, right? If you are sweating and huffing and puffing and you're losing more weight, right? You're shedding more weight. Not necessarily. That's where a lot of people, they think, oh my gosh, I want to get on top of my fitness. I'm going to do a ton of HIIT classes. I'm going to do a ton of high intensity cardio. And they feel like they are just like the pounds are just sweating off because they're red in the face. They can't get up out of the floor. They're a puddle of sweat and they feel like they've worked so hard. And yes, they have worked so hard, but is it necessarily the best type of workout for fat loss? Maybe not. That's because the higher your heart rate gets, the more you're actually using carbohydrates and protein and not fat for fuel. So for weight loss, it could be best to exercise in the zones that rely on fat for fuel. So that would be like zone 1 through zone 3. That's where, again, my client's brother-in-law is swearing by zone 2 cardio. And this would be the reason why. When your heart rate increases, what happens is you're not taking in as much oxygen, and then you can't oxidize fat very fast or fast enough when you have less oxygen. So then your body has to turn to another more readily available energy source to provide fuel, AKA that's going to be glycogen, also known as carbohydrates, because that's going to be a more readily available source of fuel for your body. So that's where you can do short bursts in higher, more intense heart rate zones to push your body. Overall, though, it's best to spend longer periods, like closer to that 50 to 70% of your max heart rate for the most efficient fat loss results. So there is nothing wrong with shorter bursts at higher intensities. I actually am going to be releasing a podcast episode talking about some tips for sculpted abs. And I think short, intense sprint bursts are fantastic. But if your goal, again, is weight loss or fat loss, you want to spend more time in longer periods closer to that 50 to 70% heart rate max for more fat loss results. So, this is where a lot of people, again, when they are thinking weight loss, they just want to go do a really intense cardio session. And then they're neglecting oftentimes maybe like walks throughout the day. What they don't realize is those walks throughout the day and that low intensity steady state exercise and cardio, because it still is cardio, you guys, moving your body in any form or fashion, you're going to be in one of those cardio zones. So that's still cardio, but it's actually staying in that, zone 1, 2, or 3 cardio range by moving that way. So that could be recommended if a goal is weight loss or fat loss. And then also, let's not forget that strength training is also super important for fat loss. Okay. That's not what we're talking about today, because we talk about strength training a lot. Because if you've been around a minute, how important it is and how much I talk about it. But having more muscle mass is going to boost your metabolic rate and the number of calories that you burn at rest. That means that with more muscle, you'll burn more calories throughout the day, which will help promote weight loss. So, this is where I hear so often from women, especially women, men too, but mainly women, that they're like, I want to lose weight. Should I like cut back on some of my strength training? I'm like, why? Why? Why would you? Like, what the heck? No, because that's the last time, especially if you want to maintain muscle mass while you're trying to lose body fat, you definitely need to keep up with your strength training. And your strength training is going to help you maintain and build muscle, which is going to help your metabolic rate. It's going to help you burn more calories. It's going to help your weight loss efforts. You need strength training, right? So that's all I'll say for this episode on strength training. But for the average exerciser, back to the cardio zones, you can really turn mostly to your body's cues to understand whether you're, getting a good workout or not, like where you are. Like if you are carrying on a normal conversation without much effort, your heart rate isn't all that elevated. It's pretty simple. You can assume that you're in one of those zone 1 through 3 cardio ranges. I'm sorry if you guys can hear notifications coming through on my desktop. I'm in a group chat and definitely should have turned that off because they're going to be coming in hot. But anyway, if you are carrying on a normal conversation with minimal effort, your heart rate isn't all that elevated. If you are struggling to keep up with talking, your heart rate is spiking. Okay. It's really that simple. Some people do find it motivating to know what their heart rate zone is. And if that helps you, keep on track with your exercise program, that's okay. For everyone else, the talk test works just fine. Like, can you talk and carry on a conversation when you're exercising? Okay. If the answer is yes, then you're in a moderately easy zone. Not everyone should stress about the numbers, especially if that becomes a barrier to you enjoying exercise. And honestly, I don't hardly ever pay attention to exact heart rate numbers or zones. Like people can get so hung up on the minutia, things like heart rate zones or what is the optimal exercise for growing your glutes or what is, the optimal rep range or tracking, I don't know, meat raw versus tracking it cooked. Like, oh my gosh, people get so hung up and obsessed with the minutia. instead of paying attention to the big rocks that are actually going to move the needle. And I find that heart rate zones really aren't all that important if you simply use the talk test to determine if you are doing low intensity or high intensity exercise. There are much more important things like hitting your macronutrients daily, getting enough protein, fats, and carbs for your body, getting enough sleep, getting enough steps, strength training, using progressive overload. There are way more important big rocks to focus on than some of this minutia. So don't get hung up on that. But if you are curious about heart rate zones, then this episode was for you. I feel like maybe 40% of this episode was my tangent around why they're not crucial to pay a ton of attention to, but it can be informative to, again, know your max heart rate, know your resting heart rate, and then have a somewhat of an understanding of those zones, but do not get hung up on the minutia. So that's it, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next episode.